For many years, Venezuela has appeared in international headlines as a country in crisis. Runaway inflation, economic collapse, and mass emigration. Yet behind this bleak picture lies a striking paradox. Venezuela is sitting on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. It is precisely this contradiction that has ensured Venezuela has never fallen outside the strategic radar of major powers, especially the United States. The question is, why would a country that has become a shale oil superpower like the US still crave Venezuelan oil? Is this merely an economic story, or is it part of a much larger power game in the Western Hemisphere? To answer that question, we need to set aside familiar political slogans, push ideological debates to the background, and focus on the fundamentals: geography, resources, and strategic interests. If we look only at current production, Venezuela hardly stands out. But when it comes to proven reserves, it ranks first in the world, surpassing even Saudi Arabia. Most of these reserves are concentrated in the Oronoco belt, often described as an ocean of oil on land. In theory, at long-term average oil prices, the economic value of Venezuela's reserves could reach tens of trillions of dollars. This is not a single oil field, but a resource base large enough to sustain an energy superpower for decades. The irony is that Venezuela has never lacked oil. It has lacked the ability to turn oil into economic strength. Extreme nationalization, poor management, underinvestment, and sanctions have caused oil output to collapse over many years. But for the United States, this does not diminish the value of Venezuela's oil. It simply turns it into a stranded asset. Not all oil is created equal. Venezuelan crude is mostly heavy oil, with high sulfur content, making it more difficult and costly to extract and refine than light crude. Ironically, this is exactly what makes it so attractive to the U.S. For decades, the United States has built a massive refining system along the Gulf Coast, specifically designed to process heavy crude from Venezuela and the Middle East. When Venezuelan supplies were cut off, these refineries were forced to seek alternatives that were farther away, more expensive, and riskier. In other words, Venezuelan oil is not just abundant, it is a near-perfect match for U.S. refining infrastructure. A stable return of this supply would significantly lower import costs and strengthen America's energy security. Beyond oil, Venezuela possesses something equally valuable: a strategic geographic location. Situated in northern South America, the country has more than 2,800 kilometers of coastline along the Caribbean Sea, just a few days sailing from U.S. territory. Compared with the Middle East or Africa, Venezuela is closer to the United States, involves safer maritime routes, and carries fewer strategic risks. Securing access to Venezuelan oil would not only mean cheaper oil, but oil located right in America's backyard. More importantly, Venezuela sits near key maritime routes linking the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean, and the Panama Canal. This transforms Venezuelan oil from a purely economic resource into a powerful geopolitical asset. Over the past decade, fueled by the shale oil revolution, the United States has risen to become one of the world's largest oil producers. At certain points, the U.S. has even been a net exporter of crude. This has led many to ask a seemingly logical question. If America has so much oil, why does it still care about Venezuelan crude? The answer lies in a simple reality. High production does not equal absolute security. The U.S. oil industry is heavily dependent on shale, an energy source with high extraction costs, short well lifespans, and extreme sensitivity to price fluctuations. When oil prices fall sharply, many shale operations become uneconomical and are forced to shut down. For this reason, the United States has a constant need to diversify its energy supply, especially towards sources with massive reserves, long production horizons, and long-term stability. Venezuela fits that profile almost perfectly. Oil is not just a commodity, it is strategic insurance. In times of global crisis, war, regional conflict, or supply chain disruptions, Countries that control large, nearby, and secure energy sources enjoy a decisive advantage. Compared with the Middle East, a region perpetually exposed to military conflict, terrorism, and religious tension, Venezuela sits in a far more stable maritime and security environment. If efficiently developed and managed, oil flows from Venezuela would face far fewer disruptions. For the United States, Venezuelan oil is like a giant energy vault sitting just outside its front door. No transoceanic shipping, no dangerous choke points, no reliance on chronically unstable regions. One often overlooked point is that U.S. strategy does not serve the state alone. It also serves American energy corporations. If Venezuela were to reopen or restructure its oil sector, U.S. companies such as Chevron, ExxonMobil, Phillips 66, and Valero would be among the primary beneficiaries. They bring with them world-leading heavy oil extraction technology, deep experience operating complex oil fields, financial systems strong enough to support large-scale reinvestment. Reviving Venezuela's oil industry would not only increase U.S. supply security, but also generate enormous profit flows back to American firms, along with jobs, tax revenue, and political influence. Throughout modern history, global power has always moved in step with energy. Nations that control major energy resources wield disproportionate influence in international affairs. Venezuela, with its vast oil reserves, is precisely such a strategic piece on the global chessboard. If the United States were to gain decisive influence over Venezuelan oil, it would mean a reduced role for OPEC, a weakened strategic position for the Middle East, greater U.S. leverage in shaping global oil markets. In other words, Venezuelan oil would not only make America stronger, it would make its rivals weaker. Over the past several years, as U.S. sanctions tightened, China and Russia expanded their presence in Venezuela through loans, investments, and energy cooperation. This has raised alarms in Washington that Venezuela could evolve into an energy outpost for America's competitors, right in its own backyard. For the United States, losing Venezuela would not just mean losing oil. It would mean losing influence across South America and the Caribbean. That is why U.S. interest in Venezuelan oil goes far beyond economics. It reflects a deeper strategic goal, preventing rival powers from expanding their reach in the Western Hemisphere. On the map, Venezuela functions like a hinge connecting North America, Central America, the Caribbean, South America. Strong influence over Venezuela allows the United States to link and shape the entire energy space of the Western Hemisphere. At that point, oil is no longer just fuel. It becomes geopolitical leverage. When Venezuela is mentioned, oil is usually the only thing people talk about. But in reality, oil is just the center of a much broader resource system. Venezuela also possesses natural gas, iron ore, bauxite, gold, and a range of other strategic minerals. What truly matters is this: oil and gas do not exist in isolation. They provide energy and feedstock for petrochemicals. Petrochemicals support metallurgy, and metallurgy, together with petrochemicals, forms the backbone of heavy industry. In theory, a country that possesses all these pieces can build a fully integrated industrial economy. Venezuela is one of the very few developing countries endowed with such a complete resource framework. And to activate this entire system, oil is the first and most critical key. From a strategic standpoint, the United States understands that everything cannot be developed at once. Rebuilding a resource-based economy like Venezuela's must start with the sector that generates the fastest and largest cash flow. That sector is oil. When oil production resumes, cash flow returns. Energy infrastructure is restored. Other industries finally gain a foundation to grow. Natural gas can feed petrochemicals. Iron ore and bauxite can support metallurgy. Gold can help stabilize finances. But without oil as the starter engine, all of this remains theoretical. This is why saying the U.S. is hungry for Venezuelan oil misses the deeper point. It is not just about oil itself, but about oil as the fastest strategic breakthrough to unlock the country's remaining value. Despite its enormous reserves, Venezuela's oil industry today is in a state of severe decay. Extraction and refining systems have deteriorated after years of underinvestment. Many oil fields operate at minimal capacity, while others have been abandoned altogether. Shortages of equipment, technology, and skilled labor are widespread. Even with external capital and advanced technology, restoring Venezuela's oil output cannot happen overnight. It is a long-term process that could take many years and require tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars. Oil does not exist in a vacuum. It is embedded in a society deeply scarred by prolonged crisis. Hyperinflation, currency collapse, a weakened financial system, and eroded public trust cannot be fixed by oil revenue alone. Millions of Venezuelans have left the country. Skilled engineers, technicians, and energy specialists are in critically short supply. As a result, restarting the oil industry is not just a technical challenge, it is a human one. Any deep involvement in Venezuelan oil also carries significant political risk. Issues of sovereignty, international law, regional reactions, and global public opinion are all factors the United States cannot ignore. In other words, Venezuelan oil is undeniably attractive, but far from easy to exploit. It is a vast treasure, locked behind multiple layers of complexity: economic, social, political, and legal. For many years, the global oil market has revolved around a familiar axis: the Middle East, OPEC, Russia, the United States. Venezuela, despite holding the world's largest proven oil reserves, has remained largely sidelined due to its internal crisis. But if Venezuelan oil were to return to large-scale production, that balance would be disrupted. Additional supply from Venezuela could weaken OPEC's ability to control prices, increase competitive pressure on Middle Eastern producers, give the United States greater flexibility in managing oil prices and energy policy. At a time when the world has yet to fully move beyond fossil fuels, Venezuelan oil has the potential to become a true game changer in the global energy market. Another paradox is this: despite all the talk about renewable energy, oil will remain a cornerstone of the global economy for decades to come. Even the energy transition itself depends on oil and gas for manufacturing, transportation, chemicals, and infrastructure. For the United States, Venezuelan oil is not just about meeting today's needs. It serves as a strategic buffer during the transition period. It allows the U.S. to maintain economic stability while buying the time and strategic space needed to invest more aggressively in the energy systems of the future. In the end, the answer to the question, why is the U.S. hungry for Venezuelan oil, does not lie in any single factor, but in the convergence of multiple layers of interest. The United States is drawn to Venezuelan oil because it holds the world's largest proven reserves, capable of supporting long-term energy security. Its geographic location is ideal, close, secure, and firmly within America's strategic backyard. Its crude fits U.S. refining infrastructure, lowering costs and reducing risk. It offers geopolitical leverage, strengthening U.S. influence in the Western Hemisphere while weakening rivals. It opens the door to Venezuela's broader resource system, with oil as the first and most critical key. That said, Venezuelan oil is not a free gift. It is a treasure locked behind crisis, requiring capital, time, technology, and long-term stability to unlock. This is why America's thirst for Venezuelan oil is not impulsive or short-term, but the result of careful, long-range strategic calculation. Ultimately, Venezuela is not just a country rich in oil. It is a strategic node where energy, power, and the future of the Western Hemisphere intersect. And for that reason, Venezuelan oil has always been something the United States cannot afford to ignore.